As you settle into night, you may notice your breath slowing, your body beginning to feel heavier, and the gentle idea that a quiet story about the changing earth might help you drift toward sleep. You might even imagine the soft crackle of a campfire somewhere in the distance, warming the cool night air. Before we begin, allow yourself to sink comfortably into this moment as I offer a gentle hook. What if the calmest secrets of ancient history were hidden inside the slowest change the world ever experienced? With that thought, I assure you that this journey is meant to be peaceful, soothing, and safe. Take a small breath, release it slowly, and let your nightly ritual begin as we pivot into our story of a world quietly warming at the end of the Ice Age. Before we go further, from which country are you listening tonight, and what time is it over there? If you enjoy relaxing history stories like this, you're welcome to tap the like button, subscribe, and leave a gentle comment so I know where you're tuning in from. As the final stretch of the Ice Age unfolded, the world did not rush into warmth. Instead, temperatures shifted with the patience of nature itself, rising by the smallest degrees over many generations. The air remained cool, but there was a subtle softness to it, almost like the first hint of early morning light warming the edges of a cold horizon. People living in that era would not have noticed sudden change, only a slow sense that the winds no longer carried the same sharp bite they once did. Across vast frozen plains, enormous ice sheets rested like sleeping giants. Their surfaces glistened under pale sunlight, reflecting the sky in muted tones of blue and white. From a distance, everything appeared still, unmoving, almost silent. But within the depths of these icy walls, tiny shifts began to hum. Expanding water, expanding warmth, expanding possibility. A quiet tension grew, preparing the world for its gradual transformation. If you find your thoughts wandering just a little, let them drift gently. This story is here to support your rest, not demand your focus. You can return to the words whenever it feels comfortable. The warming did not melt the ice instantly. Instead, it loosened the edges, like fabric gently fraying after years of use. At the lowest layers, the ice softened into thin sheets of water that pooled and seeped through cracks unseen from a surface. These early signs were delicate, barely noticeable, yet they signaled the first breath of a new era. Far above, the sun continued its steady routine, rising and falling with a rhythm older than human memory. Though people did not consider the science behind the warmth, they felt the effects in small ways. Winters felt slightly shorter. Summers held a faint whisper of gentleness, and the coldest nights no longer reached as deeply into the bones as they once had. Not far from the edges of the great ice, small groups of early humans traveled across the land with quiet awareness. They had learned to read even the subtlest patterns in nature, not through complicated ideas, but through experience and observation. Snow remained thick, yet the surface softened earlier in the season. Streams stayed unfrozen slightly longer. These tiny clues told them that the earth was shifting under their feet. Every now and then, as you listen, you might notice your breathing becoming steadier. This is a gentle reminder that you're doing perfectly fine. You can listen as lightly as you wish. Deep within the frozen sheets, pressure built slowly. Layers of ice compacted over thousands of years began to respond to the faint warmth sinking into them. The ice groaned softly, stretching and adjusting to the subtle change. These sounds likely echoed through valleys in long, low rumbles, though so spread across time that no single moment marked a dramatic shift. The landscape itself held onto a sense of quiet perseverance. Mountains remained strong, valleys remained wide, and the wind continued its familiar echo across frozen surfaces. Yet beneath all the stillness, warmth worked its way into the heart of the land, changing textures, softening edges, preparing ancient ground for new life that would one day emerge. People of that era carried on with calm routines. They lit fires using the resources available to them, always remembering that the benefits of warmth came by the will of the Creator who allowed fire to bring comfort. They sheltered in places shaped by nature, adjusting their lives according to the seasons without forcing anything. Life moved slowly, peacefully, in harmony with the gradual warming. As ice softened, small pockets of meltwater began to gather beneath the surface. These pockets expanded quietly, creating thin tunnels where water trickled with a delicate rhythm. Over time, these trickles grew stronger, carving small paths that would eventually become the first channels of new rivers. No one noticed these tiny changes at first, but they were the early heartbeat of the great ice melt. If you're easing deeper into relaxation, that's perfectly all right. This moment is yours to unwind. The story continues at a gentle pace, steady and unhurried. Above the ice, the sky shifted too. Clouds drifted differently, carrying moisture in patterns that hinted at a warming world. Sunlight touched the surface of the ice with slightly more strength each year, creating a faint shimmer that would have been barely visible but present nonetheless. The landscape glowed softly, as if preparing itself for change. Families living during this slow transition likely shared quiet evenings, resting after long days of movement and gathering. They watched the horizon, listened to the wind, and noticed subtle differences in how the seasons settled upon them. They didn't need to explain it. They simply adapted, embracing the calm certainty that nature always moved according to a greater plan. The earth continued warming, not with haste but with clarity, as if unfolding a message written across centuries. This warming was gentle, steady, and full of quiet anticipation, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the story of our world. As meltwater gathered beneath the surface of the great ice sheets, tiny rivulets began to slip down gentle slopes carved long ago by pressure and time. Each drop of water carried the memory of ancient cold, yet now it moved with a quiet purpose, shaping new paths across the land. These early flows created soft murmurs beneath the ice, a hidden soundtrack of the Earth's slowly awakening from its frozen age. Above these hidden streams, the ice remained monumental and vast, stretching across the horizon like a silent monument of history. Yet within its massive form, new patterns emerged. Layers that once held firm now shifted with subtle ripples. The thick sheets responded to warmth the way fabric responds to a gentle tug, bending and creasing almost imperceptibly. Anyone walking the surface might have heard faint echoes of distant cracks, spaced out across months or years. If your mind feels a little lighter as you listen, that's completely natural. Let each word simply guide you deeper into stillness without any effort at all. Toward the edges of the ice, the first signs of seasonal thaw appeared earlier each year. Snow that typically lingered until late spring now softened under the touch of warmer breezes. Pools of meltwater formed in shallow dips, reflecting the pale colors of the late winter sky. Early humans traveling near these areas might have paused to observe how the snow felt different beneath their feet, softer and less stubborn than the years before. These travelers did not measure the world with instruments or detailed records. They measured it through instinct, memory, and daily experience. They felt changes in the air. They saw changes in the ice. And in their quiet routines, they adapted to the new rhythm without forcing anything. Their lives remained grounded, steady, and shaped by the conditions that the Creator allowed to unfold around them. The warming air influenced more than just the ice. It also shaped the landscapes that waited patiently beneath. Soil long trapped under frozen layers began to loosen, gaining breath and moisture. When the ice finally receded from certain regions, it revealed empty stretches of dark earth, untouched for thousands of years. These new surfaces held the potential for life, ready to support fresh growth in seasons to come. You may notice your body relaxing even more as we move through this part of the story. This is another gentle reminder that you're welcome to release any remaining tension and let yourself drift. As more ice melted, small streams gathered into larger ones. These growing waters moved with a slow but persistent flow, carving channels that would become the earliest outlines of future rivers. Over centuries, these rivers would support new landscapes, new animals, and eventually new human journeys. But for now, they existed as newborn waterways, quietly exploring the world that waited for them. The atmosphere during these transitions carried a delicate balance. Some days felt colder, some warmer, yet the overarching shift leaned steadily toward a gentler climate. The wind carried a new softness, brushing against the land with a tone that suggested change. Even the color of the sky seemed to evolve, slightly brighter during the warmer seasons, hinting at a future where ice no longer dominated the horizon. Early communities living near the edges of these icy plains likely noticed how food sources shifted. Animals that once roamed further south began moving into regions newly softened by warmth. The people followed these patterns with respect for the natural order, understanding that their survival depended on careful observation and patience. They harvested what they needed, always aware that the Creator was the ultimate provider of all sustenance. At times, the melting ice released echoes of deep rumbling, like distant thunder stretched across days. These sounds were not frightening. They simply marked the slow movements of structures larger than any human settlement. The earth shifted at its own pace, making room for the landscapes that would eventually flourish in the warmth. If you're drifting a little, that's perfectly all right. Think of this moment as a safe harbor, where the story flows around you without demanding anything in return. In some regions, the retreating ice left behind shallow basins. Over time, these basins filled with clear, cold water. The first lakes formed gradually, pooling in areas shaped by millennia of pressure. Early humans may have approached these lakes with curiosity, noticing the clarity of the water and the stillness of the surface. These lakes reflected the sky like mirrors, sitting calmly in the newly exposed land. As the warming continued, vegetation began to explore the thawed soil. Moss appeared first, creating soft patches of green on dark earth. Small grasses followed, spreading carefully across the land, their roots gently weaving through the loosened soil. These early plants played an essential role, preparing the ground for future forests that would one day define entire regions. With warmth came new sounds: water dripping, ice stretching, wind flowing differently through newly opened valleys. All these small shifts created a quiet symphony of change. Though no single sound was dramatic on its own, together they signaled a world in transformation, stepping slowly away from the age of ice and into a gentler chapter. The people of that time might have ended their days by peaceful fires, resting after long journeys across shifting terrain. They relied on the warmth provided through the guidance of Allah, who allowed fire to bring comfort in the cold. Their nights were filled with calm conversations, shared meals, and quiet observations of the sky. They lived not in fear of the changing world, but in steady acceptance of nature's unfolding. As the Ice Age continued its slow fade, the Earth aligned itself with a new balance. Every drop of meltwater, every softened breeze, every shifting sound played a role. Together, they wove the beginning of one of history's most gentle transformations, setting the stage for the landscapes and life that would follow. The immense sheets of ice that once covered entire regions stood like cliffs of frozen time, stretching farther than any eye could see. They appeared solid and eternal, yet deep within their layers, something subtle began to stir. A faint shift, a long, quiet stretch, the slow sigh of ancient ice starting to release its grip on the land beneath. These movements were gentle, barely noticeable from the surface, but they marked the beginning of one of the calmest transformations in Earth's history. Before we continue, from which country are you listening tonight, and what time is it there? If stories like this help you rest, you're welcome to like this video, subscribe, and leave a small comment so I can see where you're tuning in from. As warmth entered the deepest layers of the ice, pressure built in steady, patient waves. Tiny cracks spread quietly, moving inch by inch across massive surfaces. These cracks didn't signal sudden destruction. They were simply the ice adjusting to a new reality, responding to the warmth allowed by the Creator. The landscape felt these changes in the form of soft echoes that reached across valleys with low, stretched-out tones. In some regions, the ice began to shift forward, not with speed, but with a grand, slow motion that unfolded over decades. The movement was almost unnoticeable to early humans nearby, but the earth felt every inch. Rocks were pushed aside with the gentlest force imaginable, soil was nudged into new paths, and the land reshaped itself without urgency. This was the planet's patient rearrangement, unfolding in silence. If you feel your breathing growing steadier as you listen, that's completely all right. Allow this gentle history to guide you deeper into calm. The edges of the ice softened first. Sunlight, slightly warmer each year, brushed the surface with a delicate touch that melted thin layers. Meltwater flowed quietly down the sides, creating narrow channels that glowed faintly under the pale sky. These early trickles mark the beginning of a long journey, one that would eventually reshape continents and form new landscapes. From above, the ice still looked immense and unchanging, but beneath, slow currents of pressure moved like quiet waves. The ice expanded in some areas, contracted in others, adapting to the subtle changes in temperature. It was almost like listening to the earth breathe, each movement drawn out over centuries. The rumbling sounds produced by shifting ice were not loud or sudden. Instead, they resembled deep murmurs, stretched over long periods, sometimes lasting hours or fading before a listener could even pinpoint their source. Early humans walking nearby might have paused, not out of fear, but simply to understand the sound. It would have been unlike anything else, soft, distant, ancient. You can let your thoughts drift in and out as the story continues. Your mind doesn't need to hold on to every detail. This is a safe space to rest. As layers of ice pushed forward, they carried stones and sediment locked within them. When the ice moved, these materials scratched the land beneath, carving long, shallow grooves that marked the direction of the glacier's journey. These markings would one day help future generations understand how far the ice had traveled. Sometimes the ice split along deep crevices that formed naturally from pressure. These crevices opened slowly, their edges sharp and smooth. Sunlight reached into the newly exposed spaces, revealing stunning shades of blue, from pale frost to deep sapphire tones. The beauty of these formations was a reminder of the Creator's intricate design, shaping even the coldest elements with purpose. Along the outer walls of the glacier, meltwater pooled into clear ponds. These ponds were calm and reflective, capturing the sky and the towering ice with perfect stillness. Animals often approached these pools, curious about the clean, cold water. Their reflections rippled gently across the surface, blending with the shifting shapes of the melting ice. As the days warmed slightly, new patterns emerged on the icy slopes. Thin sheets of meltwater glided across the surface, creating delicate streams that sparkled under the sun. These streams traveled downward, tracing natural paths created by uneven terrain. They gathered in the lowest areas, forming small networks of water that hinted at future rivers. If you notice yourself relaxing more deeply now, that's completely natural. This story is meant to settle your mind and ease you into rest. With each passing season, the great walls of ice leaned ever so slightly, responding to the soft tug of gravity and warmth. These movements were so slow they seemed motionless, yet they shaped the world in profound ways. Valleys deepened, ridges formed, and landscapes shifted in harmony with the melting ice. The ice also acted like a giant lens, refracting sunlight into gentle colors that danced across the frozen walls. Early humans who witnessed these sights might have paused in quiet appreciation, not for any mystical reason, but simply for the natural beauty placed before them. The light shimmered like soft ribbons across the ice, turning each movement into a silent work of art. As ice retreated in some areas, fresh land was revealed, smooth, clean, and untouched for thousands of years. This land held no vegetation yet, only damp soil and scattered stones left behind by the glacier. But this bare earth was important, as it would soon become the foundation for new ecosystems, new routes, and new human journeys. As the great ice sheets continued their slow retreat, deep cracks widened at a pace so gentle that generations could pass before a visible change appeared. These openings formed long, winding patterns across the frozen surface, shaped by pressure from within and warmth from above. The cracks were not dangerous explosions of ice. They were calm adjustments, like the earth stretching after a long slumber. Each shift released a low, steady hum that traveled through the ground, a reminder that even the most silent parts of nature are always in motion. Near the base of the ice walls, streams of meltwater grew stronger with each passing season. They flowed in graceful curves, carrying minerals and tiny fragments of stone polished smooth by the glacier's movement. Over decades, these streams connected, branching out into a quiet network that traced the edges of the melting ice. Early humans may have followed these paths, using them as natural guides through changing landscapes, recognizing that water often led to shelter food, and familiar terrain. If your thoughts drift while listening, that's completely fine. This story is meant to gently support your rest, not capture your full attention. Further inland, the ancient ice continued to press against the land, reshaping valleys inch by inch. The immense weight flattened some areas while raising others, creating subtle contours that would later decide the flow of future rivers and lakes. These slow adjustments were so drawn out that no single moment stood out. The transformation happened quietly, layer by layer, year after year. In regions where the sunlight lingered longer, melt patterns created intricate textures on the glacier surface. Some areas formed smooth, glass-like sections where water refroze overnight. Others developed ripple designs, shaped by afternoon warmth and evening chill. These delicate patterns shifted constantly, never lasting long, serving as gentle reminders that even in deep cold, nature continued to paint new forms across the ice. Animals wandering near these frozen walls approached them with caution yet familiarity. They sensed the changes long before they were dramatic. Herds shifted their routes slightly, adjusting to softened snow and newly formed pools. Birds flew along the glacier edges, using the reflective surfaces below to find safe landing spots or to search for scattered insects emerging in the milder seasons. As you breathe a little deeper, let these images rest lightly in your mind. There is no need to visualize them perfectly. The softness of the scene is enough. In places where the meltwater gathered into larger pools, the surface shimmered with clarity. These pools acted as early mirrors of the changing climate, their depth slowly growing as each sunny day contributed a little more water. Over time, these calm basins formed the earliest hints of future lakes that would one day become essential to the regions surrounding them. Sections of the glacier began to detach, not abruptly, but with a slow, drawn-out separation. Large blocks of ice broke away over decades, drifting short distances before settling again. These formations stood like isolated towers, carved naturally into shapes that reflected the Creator's wisdom in designing the world with such detail. They were temporary structures, though long-lived enough to witness generations of people and animals passing nearby. The sounds of shifting ice became more common but remained low and unaggressive. A deep rumble here, a soft crack there, each one stretched over long intervals. For early humans resting near their fires at night, these sounds might have blended with the wind, creating a natural rhythm that marked the passage of seasons. Every few minutes, you might notice a bit more weight leaving your shoulders. Let that ease settle naturally. There is no rush. As the glacier receded, they left patterns on the land that resembled careful carvings. Long scratches marked the direction of travel. Smooth stones dotted the ground in places where the ice had rolled them gently across great distances. These stones, now revealed to the world, hinted at journeys they had taken without ever moving under their own power. Where the ice pulled away from rugged terrain, towering cliffs and rocky outcrops emerged. These formations had been hidden beneath the glacier for ages, untouched by wind or rain. As sunlight reached them for the first time in thousands of years, the rock warmed slowly, inviting moss and small plants to approach in future seasons when the earth would become fertile again. The farther the glacier retreated, the more the land breathed. Soil loosened, valleys widened, and new paths formed across the terrain. These passages would become the future routes for animals, weather patterns, and later human migrations. Everything shifted toward a world that was slowly learning to live without ice dominating its every horizon. As the great ice sheets loosened their hold on the land, the first threads of meltwater began to escape from their frozen edges. What started as tiny droplets soon formed gentle streams that wove their way through freshly exposed soil and stone. These early flows were the earliest whispers of rivers the world had not yet known. They carried the memory of ancient cold in their temperature but moved with the promise of a landscape beginning to awaken. The water glided softly across the ground, as if testing the world it had long been separated from. Before we drift deeper into this quiet chapter, from which country are you listening, and what time is it for you tonight? If peaceful history like this helps you rest, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a small comment so I can see where you're tuning in from. In the shadows of the retreating glacier, meltwater followed gravity's gentle pull, finding paths through cracks and low-lying channels. These streams were thin at first, delicate ribbons of clear, cold water that reflected the pale sky above. As the seasons warmed slightly year after year, the streams grew stronger. They carved small grooves into the soil, softening the earth and opening the way for bigger flows to come. Early humans watching these changes might have paused in quiet curiosity, recognizing that where water moved, life often followed. As you listen, you may feel your mind drifting at its own pace. This is completely fine. This story is designed to drift with you, not pull you tightly to every detail. As the years stretched on, some of these small streams merged into broader channels. They wound through the land with gentle persistence, shaping curves and bends that would define future riverbanks. These waters were not powerful yet. They moved with patience, guided by the slopes and hollows left behind by the melting giants. Stones carried within the glacier began their journey too, rolling slowly along the riverbeds, polished smooth by the movement of water allowed by the Creator. In certain valleys, meltwater gathered into shallow pools before continuing its journey forward. These calm basins served as temporary resting places for the water, reflecting the sky in still, mirror-like surfaces. For early humans passing by, these pools offered valuable signs of changing seasons. They revealed where new routes could form and where future camps might find water after long migrations. With time, the trickles grew into steady flows that hummed softly across the landscape. The gentle rush of water over stone created a sound the world had not heard in thousands of years. It was neither loud nor urgent. It was a soothing tone, stretched over long distances, echoing the peaceful shift from ice to open land. Animals were the first to follow this new melody, approaching the rivers for fresh water and new feeding grounds. If you find your breathing slowing as you listen, that is perfectly natural. Allow each sentence to settle lightly, like water finding its path. Some rivers formed beneath the ice long before they reached the open air. Pressure melted the lowest layers of the glacier, creating hidden tunnels where water moved in darkness. When these hidden flows finally broke through the outer walls, they spilled into the daylight with soft clarity, forming the early heads of streams that would one day stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Their release was not dramatic, but steady, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. As these new waterways expanded, they gathered minerals carried from within the glacier. These minerals enriched the soil downstream, preparing the ground for future plant life. Though nothing grew yet, the land was gently being prepared. The rivers carried nutrients with quiet dedication, spreading them across plains, valleys, and new landscapes that had been frozen and untouched for ages. The rivers also shaped the weather around them. Moisture rising from their surfaces softened local climates, making the surrounding air more hospitable for animals and early humans. Nights near these waters felt slightly warmer, and fog formed more often in the early mornings. These small environmental shifts contributed to the broader changes unfolding across the world. Each day that passed brought a little more strength to the rivers. Snowmelt from higher ground added to the flow, contributing to the soft but steady rhythm of moving water. As the rivers deepened, they carved new routes through the land, sometimes creating narrow canyons, other times forming wide floodplains that glistened under the sun. If your eyes feel heavier now, let them grow heavier still. You don't need to stay fully alert. The story will remain soft and steady. Animals soon began to rely on these rivers as dependable sources of water. Herds of grazing animals visited their banks, leaving subtle tracks in the damp soil. Birds followed these herds, creating new migration routes guided by the reflective ribbon of the river below. In this era of slow transformation, the rivers quietly influenced the behavior of every living creature nearby. Rivers also shaped how early humans traveled. They walked alongside the flowing water, knowing it would lead them toward new regions, new resources, and new opportunities. Waterways offered predictable paths through unfamiliar terrain and signaled where food and shelter might be found. These rivers were not worshipped nor viewed as sacred forces. They were understood as creations of Allah that provided benefit through His will. With every season that passed, the rivers deepened their presence across the land. They gathered more meltwater, strengthened their currents, and carried with them a history written by ice, pressure, and time. As the rivers grew stronger, they began shaping the land in deeper, more noticeable ways. Softer soils gave way easily to the persistent flow, creating winding channels that followed the natural curves of the terrain. In some areas, the riverbanks rose gently on both sides, forming calm corridors that guided water like smooth pathways. These young rivers did not rush or roar. They simply continued their steady journey, carving the world with quiet consistency. Early humans who walked along these paths might have found comfort in the gentle sound of flowing water accompanying their steps. In regions where the glacier retreated more quickly, the rivers carried larger stones and fragments of ice that glimmered under the sunlight. These floating pieces drifted slowly downstream, melting along the way and contributing even more water to the growing system. The rivers adjusted gracefully, expanding their depths and widths as needed, always responding naturally to the changing environment. This interaction between ice and water formed a delicate partnership, shaping landscapes in ways that would benefit future generations. If you feel your thoughts loosening as you listen, that is completely all right. Let the calmness guide you deeper into rest. Some rivers began forming deltas where the water slowed, spreading out into multiple branches. These branching waterways created fertile patches of soil, dark and rich, ready for future plant life that would eventually flourish in warmer climates. For now, these deltas appeared as smooth, damp stretches, marked by gentle ripples and the occasional footprint of animals exploring their new surroundings. The longer the rivers flowed, the more they influenced the air around them. Moisture gathered above their surfaces, rising into the atmosphere and softening the climate over time. This moisture created early morning fogs, thin and silvery, drifting across the plains with a quiet grace. Early humans waking near these rivers might have noticed how the fog cooled their skin and softened the outlines of the landscape, turning everything into a peaceful, muted scene. As the climate continued to warm gradually, some rivers merged with others, forming larger waterways that carried greater volumes of water across the land. These mergers happened gently, without dramatic surges or sudden floods. Two streams simply flowed toward one another until they met, combining their paths into a single, unified journey. The land opened before them, ready to be shaped by the patient movement of the water. You may notice your breathing settling into a slower rhythm now. That's perfectly natural. Let the story continue at its own peaceful pace. Further downstream, the rivers began depositing fine layers of sediment along their banks. These sediments created smooth, soft ground that cushioned the steps of both humans and animals. Over time, these deposits would create fertile zones perfect for plant growth. But in this era, the soil remained quiet and untouched, waiting patiently for the seasons that would bring life. Some sections of the rivers ran beneath high cliffs carved long ago by the glacier. Water echoed gently against the rock walls, creating a soft, rhythmic sound that drifted through narrow passages. Anyone passing through these areas might have felt a sense of calm, guided by the steady murmur of the river and the cool shade of the cliffside. The rivers also carried stories of the land within their flow. Each mineral, each grain of sand, each small stone told part of the journey from ice to open earth. As the rivers traveled, they spread this history across vast regions, reminding the world of the slow transformation that reshaped everything. If your eyelids feel heavier, allow them to rest. The narration will continue softly. In some places, rivers pulled into broad, shallow lakes before continuing their path. These lakes settled into the landscape like mirrors, capturing the colors of the sky and the silhouettes of passing animals. Their surfaces barely moved except when a soft breeze brushed across them. Early humans arriving at these lakes might have paused to drink, to rest, or simply to watch the calm water reflecting the world. The rivers nurtured the land even before plants arrived. Their flowing waters carved fertile valleys that would one day become vital to human life. They shaped routes across continents, softened climates, and prepared ecosystems long before anyone realized their significance. Yet their work remained gentle, unhurried, almost unnoticed. As seasons passed into centuries, the rivers became permanent features of the world, connecting regions through their winding paths. They invited animals to migrate, guided early humans through vast territories, and laid the foundations of future civilizations. But in this moment of early transformation, they simply flowed quietly across the land, carrying the legacy of melting giants with every step of their journey. When the last shadows of the Ice Age began to retreat, the land beneath the glacier slowly revealed its hidden character. What had once been crushed under unimaginable weight emerged as a vast stretch of dark, bare earth. At first, the landscape appeared lifeless, shaped only by stone, soil, and the grooves left behind by the retreating ice. But beneath this quiet surface, something gentle and patient was beginning to stir. The ground held moisture from melting ice, the air softened with each passing year, and conditions slowly aligned for the earliest signs of life to take root. Before we continue, from which country are you listening tonight, and what time is it where you are? If calm history like this helps you rest, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a soft comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. The first plants to emerge were small, unassuming, and incredibly resilient. Mosses appeared in thin, green patches along the dampest areas of exposed soil. They clung quietly to stones and slopes, spreading outward just a few centimeters each year. These delicate growths didn't rush or compete. They simply filled the spaces left open by the ice, softening the harshness of the terrain. Their presence signaled that the land, once locked in frozen silence, was finally ready to breathe again. If your mind drifts as you listen, allow it to drift freely. This story is meant to follow you gently into rest. As temperatures continue to warm, small grasses and hardy plants join the moss. Their roots work their way into the loosened soil, drawing water from the melt and preparing the ground for future vegetation. These early plants pave the way for larger species by enriching the soil with organic material, making it more welcoming for seeds carried by the wind. The transformation was slow and subtle, yet undeniably steady. Wind played an important role in this awakening landscape. It carried tiny seeds across long distances, scattering them gently over the bare earth. Many seeds did not take root, but some found exactly the right combination of moisture, light, and temperature to begin sprouting. These young shoots reached upward with fragile determination, responding to the conditions that the Creator had allowed to unfold, bringing life where there had once been only cold and stone. As you listen, you may feel your body growing heavier in a comforting way. That's a good sign that you're settling into the rhythm of this quiet history. Over the years, shrubs began to appear, rising slightly above the grasses and moss. Their branches were thin, flexible, and able to survive the still cool climate. These shrubs formed small clusters across the land, turning empty plains into gentle patches of muted greens and browns. Each cluster marked a tiny step toward the forests that would eventually dominate these regions. In wetter areas near streams and meltwater channels, plants that favored moisture grew more quickly. Their roots traced the edges of flowing water, stabilizing the soil and preventing erosion. These early networks of vegetation created small oases across the recovering landscape, attracting animals that ventured into the former ice-covered territories. If your breathing has slowed, let it slow a bit more. There is nothing to rush right now. As plant life expanded, insects followed. Tiny creatures moved among the moss and grasses, playing their natural role in maintaining balance within the ecosystem. Their presence helped spread pollen, break down organic matter, and support the next wave of life that would soon arrive. Each small organism played a quiet part in shaping the rebirth of the land. The first small trees appeared only after many generations of plant growth. Their roots extended deep into the earth, anchoring them against harsh winds that still swept across the plains. These young trees were modest in size, not yet forming forests, but they stood out as early signals of a world gaining strength. Spruce, birch, and other cold-tolerant species tested the ground, rising slowly and carefully. In areas where trees successfully took hold, their presence changed the environment around them. Their roots improved soil structure, their fallen leaves enriched the ground, and their branches offered shade that helped retain moisture. Over time, these small groves grew denser, forming the earliest outlines of future woodlands. Every few minutes, you might notice a deeper sense of calm settling in. Allow it to settle fully, without resisting. With more vegetation came more animals. Herbivores arrived first, grazing among the grasses and shrubs. Their movements helped spread seeds and naturally trim overgrowth, ensuring balance as new life continued to expand. Their presence also encouraged predators to follow, forming the earliest stages of a recovering ecosystem. The soundscape changed too. Instead of the deep rumbles of shifting ice, the land now offered new tones: rustling leaves, buzzing insects, and the soft steps of animals exploring their surroundings. These gentle sounds mark the arrival of a world becoming alive again. As forests began their earliest stages of growth, the land shifted from emptiness to renewal. The cold, barren ground that had once slept beneath glacier was slowly turning into a place of color, texture, and quiet vitality. As the first clusters of young trees spread across the thawing land, their presence influenced everything around them. The shade beneath their branches kept the soil cool and moist, allowing new plants to thrive in protected pockets. Over generations, these small groves grew taller and wider, their roots strengthening the earth and anchoring it against harsh winds. This slow development created natural shelters where plants, insects, and small animals found refuge. With each passing season, the once barren plains began to resemble the earliest outlines of true forests. Near riverbanks and former meltwater pools, trees grew more quickly. These areas offered abundant moisture and rich soil, nourished by minerals carried down from the melting ice. Saplings crowded together in narrow bands along the water's edge, forming green corridors that followed the river's winding paths. Early humans walking through these regions might have noticed how the temperature felt slightly different near these growing woodlands, cooler in the day and warmer at night, shaped by the vegetation allowed to exist through Allah's will. If your body feels a bit heavier now, let that comfort deepen. You are safe to relax. As more trees took root, birds began to appear. They nested in the branches, bringing with them seeds from distant places. Through their daily rhythms of feeding and flight, they contributed to the spread of vegetation across the land. Their soft calls echoed through the early woodlands, adding new layers to the natural soundscape. These gentle sounds mark the return of life to areas once dominated entirely by ice. With the arrival of birds and insects, the ecosystem grew more complex. Fallen leaves enriched the soil, allowing shrubs and smaller plants to flourish beneath the canopy. Over decades, patches of vegetation once separated by open ground slowly merged, forming connected networks that stretched far beyond their original boundaries. These connections helped the forest grow more resilient, able to withstand seasonal changes with delicate balance. Every now and then, you may notice your thoughts drifting off, almost as if they're walking quietly through this ancient landscape. This feeling is welcome. Let it continue. In the higher elevations, forests developed more slowly. Cold winds lingered, and the soil remained rocky and thin. But even there, hardy trees and shrubs managed to take hold. They grew in small clusters along ridges and slopes, forming pockets of greenery in places where one might not expect life to thrive. These patches played an important role in stabilizing the terrain, preventing erosion as the climate continued to warm. Over vast stretches of land, forests deepened their presence. Tree roots intertwined below the surface, creating natural networks that shared moisture and nutrients. Their branches interlocked above, forming shaded paths that shielded the ground from direct sunlight. These sheltered areas became ideal environments for animals seeking protection from predators or harsh weather. As you listen, breathe gently. Allow the calmness of this slow-growing forest to drift through your mind. With time, the forest floor became a world of its own. Layers of leaves softened each step, small fungi appeared in shaded corners, and tiny creatures shuffled through the undergrowth. The soil, once bare and cold, transformed into a living tapestry of textures and nutrients. Every inch of ground carried subtle signs of renewal. Larger animals eventually followed the expanding forests. Deer-like creatures wandered through the shaded clearings, grazing on young shoots and leaves. Their presence helped spread seeds even further, creating a natural partnership between animal movement and plant growth. Predators trailed behind them at a respectful distance, forming the early links of a balanced food chain. As the centuries passed, The forest stretched across valleys and plains once dominated by ice. They breathed life into the land, softened harsh climates, and prepared the world for future generations who would one day depend on their stability and resources. Yet all of this happened slowly, peacefully, without dramatic moments, just steady transformation guided by the natural order. As the world warmed and the forests began to spread, animals across the continents felt the quiet signal of change. Herds that once relied on the frozen plains for shelter and food slowly shifted their patterns, following the softening climate. The land, once covered in endless snow, now offered patches of grass and tender shoots. Step by step, season by season, animals began moving toward regions where the land awakened first. Their migrations were not rushed. They were careful, thoughtful adjustments shaped by instinct and the conditions the Creator allowed to unfold across the earth. Before we continue, from which country are you listening tonight, and what time is it in your part of the world? If peaceful storytelling like this helps you rest, you are welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a gentle comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. The first to roam were the large grazing animals. Mammoths, bison, and reindeer slowly wandered across the new landscapes, sniffing the air and testing the softened ground with each step. These creatures had survived the harshest winters imaginable, and now they sensed that the world was offering new possibilities. They moved cautiously, but with an unspoken confidence, knowing that fresh food and safer shelter might be found in the thawing plains and young forests ahead. If your mind begins to drift here, let it drift naturally. This story is meant to float with you. The thaw created new paths for migration. Former ice corridors that were once difficult to cross became open fields dotted with low vegetation. Herds followed these routes in long, gentle lines, leaving winding trails in the damp soil. Each group traveled at its own pace, sometimes stopping to graze, other times simply pausing to observe how the world was changing around them. Predators adjusted their routes as well, though they did so with caution. Wolves and other hunters moved along the fringes of these migrating herds, keeping their distance while studying the new terrain. They relied on their instincts to maintain balance, taking only what they needed and never exhausting the land. Their presence served as a natural regulator, ensuring harmony as the ecosystems reshaped themselves. Near the rivers formed by melting ice, animals gathered to drink from the clear, cold water. These rivers provided not only hydration but also clues about the safest paths to follow. Tracks appeared along the riverbanks, hoof prints, paw prints, and delicate marks left by birds. These signs created natural guides for other animals, helping them navigate unfamiliar territory with reassurance. If your breathing has slowed a little, that's completely natural. This gentle pace is here to support you. With the spread of vegetation, smaller animals began exploring the recovering environment. Rabbits darted between shrubs, rodents searched for seeds, and birds hopped along the ground in search of insects awakened by the warmth. Their movements brought energy to the silent land, filling the air with soft rustles and rhythmic pattering. These tiny creatures played an important role, spreading seeds and maintaining the balance of the growing ecosystem. Some animals faced challenges during the shift. Creatures adapted to extreme cold searched for shaded regions where snow lingered longer. They moved carefully through slopes and valleys that still held cooler temperatures. Though their environments changed, they adapted gently, guided by instinct and the natural order set before them. The warming climate also encouraged new interactions among species. Animals that rarely crossed paths during the Ice Age now encountered one another near rivers, forests, and valleys. Some competed for food, while others simply shared the recovering landscape without conflict. These interactions helped shape the early structure of post-Ice Age ecosystems. Every now and then, you might feel a deeper sense of relaxation washing over you. Allow it to settle fully. As herds expanded their migration routes, they created paths that would later guide human travelers. These animal trails mark the easiest terrain, leading through gentle slopes, river corridors, and sheltered areas. Early humans often followed these routes, trusting the natural wisdom of the animals that had explored the land before them. In the higher altitudes where cold lingered longer, animals moved at a slower pace. They searched for patches of grass that managed to grow in sheltered spots and waited patiently for warmer seasons to arrive. Their steady movements mirrored the rhythm of the land, never hurried, always in harmony with the environment around them. Larger predators watched all of this from a distance. They observed the new patterns, adapting their own routines based on the behavior of prey animals. Their movements remained measured and balanced, ensuring that no species overwhelmed another. This delicate equilibrium supported the early development of thriving ecosystems after the long, frozen era. As the landscape warmed, the migrations continued, slow, steady, and full of quiet purpose. Animals shaped the land with every step, spreading seeds, stirring soil, and forming roots that future generations, both animal and human, would rely on. As the world continued to warm, many species discovered new opportunities in regions once hidden beneath ice. Valleys previously carved by glacier now held grasses and young shrubs, creating welcoming feeding grounds for migrating animals. Herds moved into these areas with gentle confidence, grazing carefully and learning the new rhythms of the land. Their routines, shaped by instinct and the conditions permitted by Allah, helped maintain balance across the recovering ecosystem. Each step they took contributed to the slow transformation of the world, pressing new trails into the softening soil. In the plains farther south, where warmth arrived earlier, herds expanded rapidly. Mammoths used their tusks to sweep aside snow that remained in shaded pockets, revealing patches of edible plants underneath. Bison grazed in large groups, their movements coordinated and calm. Reindeer followed the growth of moss and low shrubs, adjusting their routes as the environment changed. These animals, once dependent on frozen ground, now embraced landscapes shaped by grasslands and early forests. If you feel your attention drifting, allow it. This story is designed to move softly around you. Some migrations followed old patterns, but many new routes formed as rivers, valleys, and forests reshaped the land. Animals searching for cooler regions traveled northward or toward higher ground. Those seeking abundant plants moved into the growing forests. Over centuries, these movements created invisible lines across the continents, lines that countless generations would eventually follow. Predators adapted as well. They learned the new paths prey animals preferred and adjusted their movements accordingly. Wolves traveled in fluid formations, studying the terrain and using the environment to their advantage. They never overhunted, maintaining the balance necessary for healthy populations. Their quiet footsteps echoed through the forests and plains, blending with the rustling trees and the gentle hum of the wind. Near water sources, life flourished. Birds crowded the riverbanks, searching for insects and seeds. Fish returned to expanding streams, filling them with flashes of silver beneath the surface. Amphibians thrived in damp conditions, their presence signaling healthier, more diverse environments. Each creature helped stabilize the growing ecosystem, playing a small but vital role in restoring balance. If your breathing feels softer now, let it soften further. You're doing well. As forests expanded, animals adapted to the shaded, cooler environments. Deer-like creatures grazed on tender leaves, while smaller mammals nested in fallen logs or under dense shrubs. Birds built homes in the branches above, using twigs, grass, and feathers to weave protective nests. These early forests became bustling networks of life, though their sounds remained soft and gentle. In open plains, the migrations continued uninterrupted. Herds traveled in long arcs across the horizon, moving from one feeding ground to the next. Their hoofbeats left rhythmic impressions in the soil, marking the land with patterns that would last for seasons. These trails acted as natural highways, later used by early humans navigating the recovering world. The colder regions still held traces of winter, though they too began to change. Animals adapted to chillier conditions sought out reliable food sources in sheltered pockets of vegetation. They lived in harmony with the slower pace of the terrain, moving only when needed and preserving their energy for the cold nights that lingered longer than elsewhere. If your eyelids grow heavier, let them drift downward without resistance. Over time, the migrations created dynamic patterns across entire continents. Some animals traveled in repeating cycles, returning to familiar grounds each year. Others moved unpredictably, following rainfall, plant growth, or seasonal shifts. These movements helped spread life, distribute nutrients, and maintain ecological balance throughout the warming world. As predators and prey adapted to the new conditions, balance became more refined. Ecosystems that had once been dominated by ice now supported complex interactions. Each species played its role without overwhelming the others, maintaining stability across vast regions. By the end of this transitional era, the animal world had fully adjusted to the melting ice and the changing climate. Their movements reshaped landscapes, influenced vegetation, and created the foundation for future ecosystems. Yet all of this happened quietly, naturally, and without any dramatic turning point, just slow, steady adaptation shaped by instinct and the order of nature. As the climate shifted and the ice continued its slow retreat, early humans found themselves living in a world that changed a little more each season. The familiar frozen plains they had relied on for generations softened into wetlands, forests, and uneven terrain. Rivers formed where there had once been only hard ice, and new animal paths appeared through the warming valleys. These people moved with quiet awareness, observing every sign the land offered. Their survival depended on patience, observation, and the wisdom to adapt to the world that Allah allowed to unfold around them. Before we continue, from which country are you listening tonight, and what time is it where you are? If calm history like this helps ease your evenings, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a soft comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Many early humans traveled in small groups, learning to read the shifting landscapes with remarkable skill. They noticed how softened snow required different steps, how thawed ground left prints that told stories of animals passing nearby. These subtle cues guided their movements, helping them find safer routes across land that no longer behave like the frozen world they once knew. If your mind wanders as you listen, let it do so gently. This story is here to support your rest. Shelter became one of their greatest considerations. Caves once sealed by ice opened again, offering new places of refuge. In forested regions, fallen branches and thick shrubs provided materials for temporary structures. These shelters were humble, built with respect for the environment and using the resources available through Allah's permission. The people worked together quietly, crafting places where families could rest, share meals, and stay protected from unpredictable weather. Food sources shifted as well. Animals moved differently, plants appeared in new areas, and early humans learned to adapt their routines accordingly. They followed migrating herds when necessary, gathered roots and berries in warmer regions, and studied the behavior of smaller creatures that thrived in the recovering ecosystems. Their days were guided by the natural order, not by urgency but by steady presence. Along rivers newly formed by melting ice, people discovered fresh opportunities. These waterways provided fish, clean drinking water, and natural pathways through unfamiliar land. The sound of gently flowing water accompanied their travels, calming and predictable. Some groups chose to set up temporary camps along the riverbanks, finding the environment reliable and rich with resources. If you feel your breathing getting slower, that's a good sign. Let this gentle pace settle over your mind. The growing forests also influenced their lives. Wood became more available, offering materials for tools, fires, and simple structures. Early humans gathered fallen branches and shaped them carefully, using knowledge passed down through generations. They understood that these resources were blessings, part of the natural balance set by Allah, and they used them responsibly. As seasons shifted, humans observed how weather patterns changed. Winters remained cold, but no longer as severe as in the peak of the Ice Age. Summers grew mild and slightly longer. These transitions required adjustments in clothing, travel patterns, and the timing of hunting and gathering. Their ability to adapt came not from fear, but from experience and quiet resilience. Small groups often shared information with one another when their paths crossed. They exchanged knowledge about safe regions, migrating animals, and new types of plants appearing in the land. These interactions strengthened their survival, creating a network of understanding across vast territories. If your thoughts drift outward for a moment, allow them to float without pulling them back. This story is meant to be gentle. As forests spread, early humans learned to navigate them with care. They followed natural clearings, animal trails, and the soft flow of rivers. The forest floor, covered with leaves and moss, muffled their footsteps, allowing them to move quietly as they searched for food or explored new territories. These environments challenged them at first, but soon became familiar extensions of their world. The warming climate also encouraged the growth of new plants that provided food, fibers, and natural remedies. Early humans learned which plants were safe, which were useful, and which grew in specific types of soil. This expanding knowledge helped them adapt to landscapes that had once been barren but were now rich with possibility. The land's transformation required patience, awareness, and unity within each group. Every member contributed, whether gathering food, maintaining shelter, or studying the land for signs of change. Their way of life remained simple and grounded, shaped entirely by the natural conditions provided to them. As early humans explored these changing regions, they developed quiet methods for reading the land. They learned to judge the firmness of the soil simply by feeling it beneath their feet, recognizing which areas would turn muddy after rainfall and which remained solid enough for safe travel. Over time, these subtle observations became second nature. Their awareness was not rushed or tense. It was calm, deliberate, and shaped by seasons of reflection on the shifting environment around them. In areas where forests thickened, visibility became limited, and humans relied more heavily on sound. They listened for the rustle of small animals, the distant steps of larger creatures, or the gentle crack of branches under shifting winds. These sounds guided their decisions, helping them avoid danger while also revealing new opportunities for food or shelter. They moved with humility through the forest, respecting the natural order established by Allah. If you feel your thoughts softening, let them soften fully. This story is here to ease you into rest. Waterways continued to influence their survival. Rivers offered predictable sources of drinking water, while streams provided clues about nearby wildlife. Some groups learned to place simple markers near river bends, reminding them which directions offered the safest terrain. These markers were small and natural, such as rearranged stones or branches. They served as quiet tools for navigation, passed down through generations without spoken complexity. As the climate warmed further, storms changed in character. Rainfall became more frequent in certain regions, nourishing the growing vegetation. Early humans adapted by learning to read clouds, wind direction, and the scent of humidity in the air. These skills allowed them to prepare shelters before storms arrived, protecting their families from sudden weather shifts. Their ability to anticipate the environment became one of their greatest strengths. Throughout these regions, animals also adapted to the new climate, and humans observed these changes carefully. When herds altered their migration paths, people followed at safe distances, using the animals' instincts as guides. When predators shifted territories, humans adjusted their camps accordingly, always choosing safety and balance over confrontation. Their relationship with wildlife was grounded in respect and understanding. If your breathing has slowed again, allow it to settle deeper. You are doing perfectly well. New landscapes encouraged new tools. As forests grew denser, early humans used wood to craft walking sticks, supports for shelters, and simple containers for carrying food. They shaped these carefully, using stones to smooth the edges. These creations were humble but effective, reminders of the creativity that naturally arises when people observe the resources Allah provides through the environment. As groups moved across wider territories, they learned the importance of cooperation. Small families joined together during long migrations, sharing food, offering guidance, and helping one another cross rivers or navigate dense forests. These shared efforts strengthened their survival and allowed knowledge to spread across great distances. Changes in plant life also influenced their diet. New roots, berries, and leaves appeared as the earth warmed. People approached these carefully, testing small amounts and observing effects before adopting them into their regular routines. Their caution ensured safety, while their curiosity expanded the variety of foods available in the recovering world. Every few minutes, You may notice a deeper ease settling into your muscles. Let it stay. This pace is made for rest. In colder regions, the melting ice created tricky terrain. Loose rocks, hidden pockets of water, and uneven slopes required careful navigation. Early humans adapted by developing slower, more deliberate walking patterns, ensuring safety even in unpredictable conditions. They relied on one another, offering hands of support as they crossed uncertain areas. Along coastlines where ice once dominated, the land transformed into marshes, shallow bays, and new shorelines. These environments brought different challenges, but also opportunities. People discovered fish in the expanding waters and new types of plants in the wet soils. Each discovery shaped their understanding of the land's changing rhythm. With time, early humans grew increasingly skilled in reading the balance of the new world. Their lives became intertwined with the Earth's gentle transformation, moving as the land moved, resting when the environment required it, and thriving through patience and unity. As the great ice sheets continued melting, the oceans quietly absorbed the flowing water. Sea levels rose slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but over generations, the changes became visible across coastlines. Low-lying regions that had once been safe and familiar began to soften under the pressure of incoming tides. Small pools formed in places that had always been dry. Shorelines shifted a few steps each year, reminding early humans that the world under their feet was gradually rearranging itself according to the natural order set by Allah. The transformation was gentle, steady, and without sudden drama. Before we continue, from which country are you listening tonight? And what time is it where you are? If calming stories like this help you unwind, feel free to like the video, subscribe, and leave a quiet comment so I know where you're listening from. Many coast-dwelling groups notice the slow encroachment of water. They observe how the ocean seemed to reach farther inland with each passing season. At first, these shifts didn't cause alarm. Instead, people simply adjusted, moving their camps a little higher or choosing more sheltered areas for resting. They read the land with patience, recognizing that nature often changed its patterns in cycles that stretched far beyond a single lifetime. If you find your thoughts drifting softly, that is perfectly fine. Let the narration follow you at your own pace. In some regions, rising seas turned grassy flats into marshes. Salt water mixed with fresh water, creating shallow wetlands rich with reeds and aquatic plants. Birds arrived quickly, searching for insects that thrived in the damp soil. These wetlands became new ecosystems almost overnight, replacing the open coastlines that had existed for thousands of years. Early humans adapted by learning new routes around the marshes or using higher ground to navigate between familiar regions. On certain coastlines, the ocean carved new shapes into the land. Gentle waves smoothed rocky edges, forming coves and small bays. Over time, these formations became recognizable landmarks. Travelers used them to orient themselves as they moved along the shifting shore. Even as the sea continued to rise, its slow rhythm made it possible for humans to observe, adapt, and continue their daily routines without panic. If your breathing has slowed a little, let it slow a bit more. You are doing well. Some families that lived near the sea began noticing changes in the availability of shellfish and coastal plants. Certain species flourished in the newly formed wetlands, while others migrated toward deeper waters. Early humans adjusted their gathering habits accordingly, exploring newly submerged areas during low tide and learning which conditions supported the foods they relied on. As sea levels rose further, small islands near the coast started to shrink. Beaches narrowed, and in some cases, entire stretches of sandy shore disappeared under shallow waves. But because the change was gradual, humans rarely saw it as something to fear. Instead, they simply recognized that the coastline was alive, always moving, always reshaping itself. If your eyelids feel heavier, let that heaviness settle comfortably. In regions where river deltas met the sea, the rising water transformed the landscape even more dramatically. River channels widened, floodplains filled more quickly, and new lakes appeared inland. These changes brought new sources of fish and plants, expanding the variety of foods available to early humans. Although they needed to remain alert to changing water levels, the land continued to provide in ways that balanced challenge with opportunity. Herds of animals also adapted to these changes. Grazing animals moved inland, following the grasslands as they retreated from the encroaching tides. Predators followed them at a safe distance, continuing their natural cycles without disrupting the balance. These migrations created new trails across the countryside, many of which early humans later used for their own journeys. As the climate warmed and waters rose, some forested areas near the coast became waterlogged. Roots that had once held firm now stood partially submerged. Certain trees fell over time, but others adapted, growing in soil saturated with moisture. These flooded woods created unique environments full of insects, birds, and small mammals. As the coastline continued its slow transformation, early humans learned to read its patterns with remarkable sensitivity. They observed how the tide stretched a little farther each year, how certain rocks that once marked the edge of the water were now partially submerged, and how the ocean's rhythm echoed differently across the shore. These quiet changes allowed them to choose safer locations for resting, gathering, and storing their supplies. They understood that the land was shifting, yet they faced these changes with calm acceptance, knowing that adaptation was part of survival in a world shaped by Allah's natural laws. Some communities moved gradually inland, following elevated ridges that provided a safer distance from the rising water. They formed new camps on higher ground, choosing areas where the soil remained firm and where fresh water continued to flow reliably. These relocations were not hurried migrations but thoughtful transitions made over generations. The people walked these new paths with steady determination, carrying the memory of their former coastlines while embracing the opportunities that awaited in the inland regions. If your mind feels softer now, let it soften without resistance. You're doing well. Further along the changing shores, the sea carved winding channels that stretched into the land like gentle fingers. These channels filled with fish and aquatic plants, creating new feeding grounds for both animals and humans. People learned to navigate these waterways carefully, using natural indicators such as the direction of the current or the shape of surrounding vegetation. These skills allowed them to move efficiently through terrain that would have confused even experienced travelers just generations earlier. In some areas, cliffs that once towered above the sea found their bases slowly submerged. Waves lapped against new surfaces, smoothing edges of stone over time. These cliffs gradually developed caves and alcoves carved by water, providing natural shelters for birds and small animals. Humans occasionally used these spaces for brief refuge, appreciating the shade and stillness they offered during hotter seasons. If you notice your shoulders relaxing, allow them to settle even further. This story is here to ease you. Certain species of plants began thriving in the moist, salty environments created by the rising tides. Reeds, grasses, and salt-tolerant shrubs grew in abundance along marshy borders. These plants provided nesting places for birds and habitat for small creatures. Early humans often used these reeds as simple tools or materials for weaving basic mats and baskets. These resources were understood as provisions made possible by Allah through the changing landscape. As sea levels continued their slow ascent, some inland valleys transformed into shallow lakes. These lakes became gathering places for animals seeking water, and their presence enriched the surrounding soil. Humans used these regions for seasonal camps, relying on the fish, water plants, and animals that gathered there. They moved in harmony with the environment, arriving when resources were plentiful and leaving when the seasons shifted again. Every few minutes, you may feel yourself drifting gently. That's perfectly natural. Let the calmness continue. The interaction between land and sea created new ecosystems unlike anything that had existed before. Wetlands expanded, hosting a rich variety of life. Birds migrated along the shifting coastlines, following the rhythm of the tides and the availability of food. Their calls echoed across the moist air, adding a gentle soundtrack to the evolving world. Meanwhile, early humans used the patterns of tides, winds, and migrating animals to guide their travels. They learned to predict water movement by studying the pull of currents and the behavior of sea birds. These observations allowed them to adapt their routines, ensuring safety during their journeys near the shore. As centuries passed, the rising seas reshaped entire regions. Former plains vanished beneath shimmering shallows. Hills once miles inland now stood as small islands surrounded by water. But throughout each change, humans remained patient and thoughtful, moving in step with the land's shifting boundaries. As the massive ice sheets continued their retreat, new shapes began forming across the land, shapes that would one day become valleys, basins, and enormous freshwater lakes. These basins started as shallow depressions carved long ago by the weight of the glacier. When the ice melted, clear water flowed gently into them, slowly filling the empty spaces. At first, the pools were small, little more than cold puddles reflecting the pale sky. But over the years, they deepened and spread, becoming the early outlines of lakes that would shape entire regions. Before we continue, from which country are you listening, and what time is it for you right now? If soft history like this helps you unwind at night, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a calming comment letting me know where you are listening from. As water continued gathering in these basins, the lakes expanded quietly, guided by the slopes and channels formed beneath the ice. The edges evolved into smooth curves, outlining natural shorelines that shifted slightly each season. Early humans walking nearby might have paused at the sight. Still, cold water stretching farther than any river they had ever seen. The lakes gave off a faint chill, their surfaces calm, their depths holding the cold memory of the frozen world that had shaped them. If your attention drifts gently here, let it drift. This story will continue to meet you where your mind rests. The lakes not only formed new bodies of water but also transformed the surrounding land. Moisture rose from their surfaces, softening the air and encouraging the growth of early vegetation. Grasses, shrubs, and mosses crept toward the water, taking advantage of the consistent moisture. These lakes became magnets for life, places where animals gathered to drink and where plants thrived in the nourishing soil left behind by the glacier. In regions where the lakes deepened quickly, the water turned a deep shade of blue. This color came from the minerals washed down by melting ice, giving the lakes a striking, almost glassy clarity. Early humans may have approached these places with quiet caution, amazed by the vastness and the unfamiliar stillness. The lakes mirrored the sky so perfectly that, for a moment, one might have felt suspended between earth and heavens. As you listen, notice your breathing easing into a slower pattern. This rhythm supports your rest. In some areas, strong currents formed beneath the surface, created by streams flowing into the lakes at different temperatures. These currents shape the distribution of minerals and sediments, creating layers that subtly change the color of the water over time. The lakes remained gentle on the surface, but beneath, they moved with a hidden, steady energy that contributed to the landscape's ever-changing character. Around the younger lakes, the land remained raw and unsettled. Bare stones, loose soil, and scattered boulders dotted the terrain. But life soon ventured into these spaces. Birds flew overhead, attracted by the promise of fresh water and insects. Small mammals approached cautiously, learning the safest paths along the shoreline. This slow colonization brought the first layers of sound and movement to landscapes that had been silent for millennia. If your eyes grow heavier, let them rest even as the story continues. Over many seasons, tributaries formed in the surrounding hills. These small streams connected to the lakes, offering steady flows of fresh water. Their gentle trickles merged into soft, rhythmic patterns that echoed across the valleys. Early humans who listened closely might have recognized how these sounds shifted throughout the day, marking the passage of time through their delicate changes. Some of the larger lakes took centuries to form, expanding so gradually that generations of people witnessed only small differences. What began as a shallow pool in one lifetime could become a vast and shimmering lake by the next. These gradual transformations meant that early humans saw the lakes as living features, always changing, always preparing the land for new forms of life. Near the shores, the first fish returned, carried from upstream rivers into the growing waters. They adapted to the colder temperatures and the mineral-rich environment, becoming an important source of nourishment for wildlife. Their presence added movement to the lakes, small ripples on the surface marking moments of life beneath the stillness. As the lakes widened, their shorelines shifted gently outward. The ground closest to the water became smooth and dark, shaped by the rise and fall of levels throughout the seasons. Winds carried fine particles across the landscape, settling them along the edges and gradually building the earliest layers of fertile soil. Plants took advantage of this new richness, creating bands of green that traced the curves of the water. Early humans walking along these shores felt the cool, moist air brushing against their skin, a quiet reminder of the changing world around them. Farther inland, the melting ice created clusters of smaller lakes. Some were deep and narrow, formed by steep depressions left behind by glacier. Others were broad and shallow, spreading like sheets of silver under the sun. These lakes mirrored the sky with remarkable clarity, especially at dawn when gentle mist hovered over the surface. Animals gathered here each morning, leaving tracks that merged into well-worn paths. The lakes became central landmarks in a landscape still finding its balance. If you feel your thoughts drifting like ripples, allow them to drift peacefully. As weather patterns evolved, rainfall fed the lakes consistently. Water levels rose and fell in steady rhythms that early humans learned to recognize. In wetter years, lakes expanded slightly, reaching into areas previously dry. In drier seasons, the shorelines retreated, revealing smooth stones and patches of compacted earth. These cycles became quiet teachers, helping people understand the natural timing of the land and adjust their activities accordingly. Some lakes developed natural outlets, allowing water to spill gently into rivers that connected one body of water to another. These connecting rivers formed networks across the land, shaping routes that animals and humans alike would later follow. The interconnected system brought a sense of unity to the emerging landscapes, as if the waters were stitching the earth together with flowing threads. If your breathing slows here, let it soften fully. This pace is made to support your rest. Around the larger lakes, winds created subtle waves that lapped against the shore with a soothing, rhythmic sound. These waves helped polish rocks into smooth pebbles scattered along the water's edge. Early humans occasionally used these polished stones for tools or ornaments, appreciating the natural refinement produced by time, water, and the order allowed by Allah. Vegetation grew thicker near the most stable lakes. Willow-like shrubs leaned toward the water, their branches trailing along the surface. Moss clung to shaded stones, forming soft patches that stayed cool even in warm seasons. These pockets of life attracted small creatures, which in turn drew predators, creating a layered, thriving ecosystem. Season by season, the lakes became focal points for migration. Large animals visited them regularly, drawn by their dependable water supply. Birds followed the lakeshores, finding insects and nesting material along the banks. Their flapping wings and gentle calls added subtle sounds that echoed across the calm surface, marking the shift from barren ice to a world alive again. Every few minutes, you might feel your muscles releasing tension. Let that comfort settle deeper. In some places, the lakes grew so large that they influenced local climate. Air above the water stayed cooler in summer and warmer in winter, creating gentle breezes that shaped the growth of nearby plants. Fog formed often in the early mornings, drifting across the lakes like a slow-moving blanket. Early humans observed these patterns with curiosity, learning how the presence of such massive water bodies affected the land around them. As the lakes matured, they shaped the identity of vast regions. Valleys, hills, and plains all adjusted to the presence of these massive basins. Water life expanded steadily, from tiny algae to larger fish species that adapted to the cold, mineral-rich water. These lakes became gathering points, resources, and quiet guides across the land. By the end of this long transformation, the lakes stood as clear reminders of the world's gentle awakening. They reflected the skies above them, held the memory of the ice below them, and provided for the life that surrounded them, quietly, patiently, and with steady purpose. As the final remnants of the Ice Age softened, the Earth began settling into a new rhythm. The once frozen world no longer shifted with the harsh extremes of deep cold. Instead, temperature changes grew steadier, guiding the land, the water, and the sky toward a quieter harmony. Valleys warmed into gentle plains, forests thickened with each season, and rivers stabilized into predictable flows. It was as though the planet, after thousands of years of strain, released a long breath and allowed itself to find balance again, balance shaped entirely by the natural order established by Allah. Before we go deeper, from which country are you listening, and what time is it for you right now? If peaceful history like this helps you unwind, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a gentle comment so I know where you're tuning in from. Across the continents, weather patterns softened into familiarity. Winters still brought cold, but not the unforgiving deep freeze of earlier eras. Summers warmed the land enough for plants to flourish without overwhelming them. Rain fell more predictably. Winds shifted with a gentler rhythm. These shifts supported stability, allowing life across the planet to grow, migrate, and settle without constant interruption from extreme conditions. If your mind drifts slightly here, that's completely all right. This story is meant to flow with your thoughts, not hold them tightly. Forests that had begun as scattered patches now merged into vast stretches of green. Trees grew taller, their roots deepening into the soil enriched by centuries of mineral-rich meltwater. These forests created layers of shade, shelter, and habitat for countless animals. Birds filled the canopy with soft calls, while smaller animals found comfort in the thick undergrowth below. The forests breathed moisture into the air, helping regulate temperature and keeping the land beneath them cool and alive. Grasslands also expanded, stretching across regions once dominated by snow. The grasses swayed gently in the mild winds, forming seas of green that rippled under the sun. These plains supported herds that moved in calm cycles across the seasons. Their presence helped spread seeds, maintain soil health, and bring motion to landscapes that had been still for ages. If your breathing slows here, let it settle into that peaceful rhythm. There is no need to hold anything in. Rivers that had once rushed violently from melting glacier now found steadier courses. Their banks grew strong with roots and vegetation, reducing erosion and guiding the flow of water in smoother patterns. Fish thrived in these calmer currents, and early humans depended on the reliability of these waterways for travel, drinking water, and food. The rivers served as peaceful reminders of the gradual transformation that shaped the land. Lakes deepened into stable bodies of fresh water. Their surfaces reflected the maturing world around them. Soft skies, growing forests, wandering animals, all mirrored with quiet clarity. Shorelines became havens for life, providing feeding grounds and resting places for birds, mammals, and small creatures. These lakes played an essential role in cooling the surrounding land, creating small pockets of balanced climate wherever they formed. If your eyelids grow heavier, allow them to rest. The narration will continue without urgency. Climate zones across the planet began distinguishing themselves more clearly. Some regions grew mild and wet, others dry and open, and still others cool with lingering traces of ice. But even these colder regions became more predictable, allowing animals and early humans to adjust their routines with confidence. The world no longer shifted sharply from one extreme to another. It stretched into a steady rhythm that supported stability. As the Earth settled, ecosystems developed deeper structure. Predators and prey found consistent patterns of movement. Plants established seasonal cycles. Small creatures filled niches at every level of the food web. Each species contributed its part, maintaining the balance that allowed the environment to thrive after such a long era of cold. In high mountain regions where snow lingered longest, springs emerged from melting ice that still clung to the peaks. These springs brought fresh, mineral-rich water into the valleys below, nourishing the land as it continued to warm. Early humans learned to recognize these springs as dependable sources of clean water, guiding their travels across unfamiliar terrain. As the landscape settled into its new form, early humans found comfort in the world's growing stability. For the first time in generations, they could anticipate seasonal changes with more accuracy. Winter's cold arrived gently and left gradually. Spring brought soft rains that nourished young plants. Summer warmed the land without overwhelming it. Autumn cooled the air and prepared the forests for rest. This steady cycle guided their daily lives, allowing families to plan their movements, food gathering, and shelter building with calm certainty grounded in the natural order established by Allah. As forests and grasslands matured, the soil beneath them grew richer. Layers of decomposed leaves, roots, and organic matter created a soft foundation that supported diverse plant life. This fertile ground allowed new species to emerge, each playing a role in strengthening the ecosystem. Early humans recognized the signs of healthy land, choosing to rest in these fertile regions where food and fresh water were abundant. Their relationship with the earth deepened, built on respect, observation, and reliance on the resources Allah provided. If your thoughts drift a bit here, let them wander gently. The story will continue at its own calm pace. Animal populations stabilized as well. Predators and prey established predictable routines, creating harmony across the landscape. Herds returned to the same feeding grounds year after year. Birds followed seasonal migrations that aligned with the availability of food and shelter. This interconnected system supported life across vast regions, each species contributing a quiet piece to the planet's broader balance. In wet regions near rivers and lakes, new species of fish and amphibians thrived. Their presence signaled the health of the water. Early humans learned to observe these signs, understanding that plentiful water life meant the surrounding land was fertile and safe. These observations helped guide their movements, ensuring they settled near environments that could support their needs. If your breathing has slowed again, allow this softness to deepen. You are doing well. In drier regions, grasslands expanded into wide, open plains. The grasses formed dense layers that protected the soil from erosion and provided grazing areas for large herbivores. These plains supported vast networks of life. Early humans used these open regions for easier travel, finding clear pathways and reliable sources of food along the way. The land, once frozen and difficult, now welcomed movement and exploration. The world's new balance also brought stability to weather patterns. Gentle breezes carried seeds across great distances, helping forests spread. Rainfall nourished roots and replenished rivers. Even in areas where storms were frequent, the cycles remained predictable enough for humans and animals to prepare. This predictability brought a sense of security, replacing the harsh unpredictability of the ice-covered past. As ecosystems strengthened, early humans began to form subtle traditions based on their observations of the changing world. They learned when certain plants would appear, when animals migrated, and when storms typically arrived. These rhythms helped them organize their days and seasons, aligning their movements with the environment. Their wisdom grew as the world itself grew calmer. Every few minutes, you might feel your shoulders release a bit more tension. Let that ease settle naturally. Higher altitudes still held patches of ancient ice, yet even these areas transformed slowly. Meltwater trickled down the slopes, feeding streams that carried minerals into the valleys. These minerals enriched soil far below, nourishing plants that provided food for animals and humans alike. This connection between mountains and plains became another thread in the intricate balance of the emerging world. Over long periods, landscapes once shaped entirely by ice became places of life, movement, and harmony. Each valley, lake, and forest played a role in regulating temperature, supporting species, and maintaining the rhythm of the natural world. Early humans lived within this balance, adapting without force, respecting their surroundings, and recognizing the blessings that allowed the land to provide for them. By the end of this transformative period, the planet had found a calming steadiness. No longer pushed to extremes, it settled into a gentle cycle that nurtured life. Forests breathed moisture into the air, lakes cooled the land, and plains supported herds that moved in quiet patterns. The earth, once dominated by ice, had become a place of stability, growth, and quiet renewal. At the quiet edges of the retreating ice, the world felt as though it was pausing between two eras. The cold breath of the ancient glacier still lingered in the air, yet the land beneath carried the warmth of new beginnings. Early humans who stood near these melting giants witnessed a rare moment in history, a moment where the earth softened, shifted, and revealed landscapes unseen for thousands of years. The sound of dripping water echoed through the air, steady and unhurried, like a gentle clock counting time in long, patient intervals. Here, at the edge of the melt, everything felt both familiar and entirely new. Before we continue, from which country are you listening, and what time is it right now? If soft, relaxing history like this brings you comfort at night, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and leave a quiet comment letting me know where you're listening from. Standing near the melting ice, early humans often paused to take in the quiet scenery. Pools of clear water gathered at their feet, reflecting the towering walls of ice above. Thin streams wove their way through fresh soil, cutting small paths that sparkled under the sunlight. These people understood that the world around them was changing, but they approached it with calm curiosity. No rushing, no panic, just steady awareness, shaped by the understanding that nature unfolded exactly as Allah permitted. If your attention drifts for a moment, let it float wherever it wishes. This story will follow you gently. The air carried a distinct mixture of cold and warmth. A cool breeze from the melting glacier brushed against the skin, while the ground beneath radiated the faint heat of sunlit earth. This contrast reminded early humans that they stood between two different worlds, the fading age of ice and the rising era of new life. Each breath they took brought in the scent of wet stone, damp soil, and clean, mineral-rich water. From the tops of ridges, early humans could see how the land transformed over great distances. In the far horizon, forests gathered strength. Rivers shimmered with fresh meltwater. Valleys opened wide, welcoming early signs of growth. The people watching these scenes felt a sense of calm resolve. The world was vast, changing, and full of unknowns, but it was also generous, providing what they needed through the natural order set by Allah. If your breathing is growing slower, let it settle completely. This is a place of rest. At times, the glacier released deep, echoing rumbles, slow movements of ice shifting under its own weight. These sounds were not threatening. They were reminders of the earth adjusting, settling, and reshaping itself after millennia of pressure. To early humans, these distant groans became part of the landscape's voice, a natural soundtrack that marked the passing of seasons. Pools and streams near the glacier offered precious resources. Early humans often stopped to drink the cold, pure water, cupping it carefully in their hands. The taste carried a crisp clarity, filtered through layers of ice older than any memory. These waters nourished them, guided their paths, and marked areas rich with future possibilities. The soil near the melt held a softness unlike anything else. It was fresh, dark, and full of minerals delivered by retreating ice. Plants found fertile ground there, sprouting cautiously at first, then with greater confidence as seasons warmed. Early humans recognized this as a sign that the land would support life more abundantly in the years to come. Every now and then, you may feel a sense of calm sinking deeper into your body. Let it settle without effort. In the distance, newly formed lakes shone like mirrors, reflecting clouds and sky. These lakes, still young and cold, drew animals from across the land. Herds stepped cautiously into the shallows to drink. Birds circled overhead, searching for insects and fish. The lakes became gathering points, places where the rhythm of the earth felt especially clear and steady. As early humans walked through the changing terrain, they left light footprints on the damp ground. These prints disappeared quickly as water reshaped the soil, but in that moment, they represented the delicate interaction between people and land. Neither dominated the other. They simply moved together through the slow awakening of the world. As the ice continued to withdraw, the landscape revealed winding channels carved by centuries of pressure. These channels carried meltwater in gentle streams, flowing toward the valleys below. The water moved quietly, smoothing stones as it passed and shaping the land with patience. Early humans watched these paths form, understanding that the world was opening itself in new ways. They learned to follow these streams, knowing they often led to wider rivers, safer ground, and growing ecosystems supported by the natural order Allah allowed. Farther from the glacier, the ground became firmer. Grasses rooted themselves in the damp earth, forming soft carpets of early vegetation. These patches provided feeding grounds for small animals, which in turn signaled safe regions for humans to explore. Each step on this new soil reminded them that they were walking on land untouched for thousands of years, a place being renewed with purpose and balance. If you feel your body growing heavier, allow it to do so. Your rest is welcome here. As the sun set across these rejuvenated lands, long shadows stretched from scattered stones and early shrubs. The golden light reflected on the water, turning shallow pools into glowing mirrors. Early humans often paused during these times, taking quiet moments to observe the calm unfolding before them. The transition from ice to warmth seemed almost spiritual in its stillness, not through rituals, but through the awareness of nature's vast cycles. During colder nights, the meltwater refroze in delicate layers along exposed surfaces. Thin sheets of frost glimmered beneath the moonlight, tracing patterns across the land. These frosted lines reminded early humans that the Ice Age had not vanished instantly. The world still carried its memory in quiet, beautiful fragments. As the seasons progressed, animals moved with greater confidence into the newly opened land. Their soft footsteps, rustling fur, and distant calls blended into a peaceful soundscape. Early humans walked with balanced caution, studying the animals' paths and adjusting their own accordingly. The presence of wildlife reminded them that they were part of a larger system, one that relied on harmony rather than dominance. If you feel yourself drifting, let yourself drift naturally. This story is here to support your rest. Along the edges of the melt, thin fog often settled at dawn. It hovered just above the ground, wrapping stones and shrubs in a soft, pale glow. This mist created a sense of gentle mystery, as if the land was slowly revealing its secrets one breath at a time. Early humans moved through it carefully, listening to the faint trickle of water and the distant calls of waking animals. In the afternoons, warmth returned to the valleys. The softened earth dried slightly, leaving firm trails that humans could follow with ease. These trails wound around newly formed lakes, over hills shaped by ancient ice, and through early forests that promised shade and shelter. The land was changing, but it offered guidance through its patterns and gentle contours. Over time, people learned to read the melt's edge as a story written across the earth. Each stream, stone, and shifting slope told them something about the past and what was to come. They walked with awareness, appreciating the balance that emerged as the world settled into its new form. If your breathing has deepened again, just let it be. You're resting exactly as you should. As they moved closer to the last remnants of the melting ice, early humans sometimes rested in quiet reflection. They understood that they were witnessing the closing of one era and the beginning of another. The ice had shaped their world for generations, carving mountains, forming valleys, and guiding migrations. Now, the melting brought renewal, transforming hardship into possibility. The gentle drip of water along the edges of the glacier became a steady companion. It was a sound of transition, neither sad nor urgent, simply a reminder that change can be soft, slow, and natural. The people who listened felt grounded, knowing they were part of a process far larger than themselves. At the end of each day, when the sky dimmed and the stars appeared, the land settled into a deep quiet. The meltwater slowed, the air cooled, and the world rested. Early humans sat near their fires, warmed by the heat Allah allowed fire to provide, reflecting on the journey of their world. And now, as this story gently closes, may you also find rest in the calm unfolding around you. Thank you for listening to this peaceful journey through history. May your night be light, your mind easy, and your sleep deep and restorative.